Thank you, Karen Corla, and I welcome the opportunity to speak on this bill. And this particular bill, which aims to ensure effective access to cash across the state, I think is a very welcome proposal, and it will set criteria for ATM and cash services points, their accessibility, so that no region is left behind. And I think it is important that people have access to cash. And it's not just older people, but there are many people who are quite concerned about issues regarding online fraud, and this is a way to avoid it. But also, we must remember that organisations like MABS and other advisors in this country are advising people who find it difficult to manage money or have limited resources to use cash, because it is a more effective way to try and manage that money. And I think we need to be conscious of that, and we need to ensure, as Deputy Shortall has said, it's not just about being able to access cash, it's also about being able to use that cash. And I want to say that, you know, the reason that there's merit in this is because despite significant government investment that we've seen in urban and rural regeneration funds, innovative funds to revitalise communities, a decision, as you know, that was taken by the last government that now thankfully is coming to fruition. We do, despite all of this investment, face a critical moment in our local communities. And that's down in part to the future of the financial infrastructure in many of our provincial towns. And the decision by Bank of Ireland to close its doors in towns of my own constituency like Elphin and Strokestown and Ballygar and Dunmore has been a significant blow to these particular towns. And coupled with the fact that Ulster Bank has withdrawn from the Irish market, I believe, Minister, that we need to go beyond the measures that are here as before the House today. And I believe the actions of the banks to date underscore the urgent need for a state banking force. Before the pandemic, these particular towns that I've spoken about were on a path to revitalisation, supported by government funding for tourism, rural regeneration and various town schemes. However, the closure of these bank branches has set these recovery plans back significantly. And I believe that we must now establish a state bank that serves both SMEs and personal customers. The reality is that our current banking model excludes two key customer bases: personal customers and small businesses. And this legislation before us here today does nothing to address that. With 13% of people not using online banking and even higher percentages in regional Ireland, we need to have accessible banking services right across this country. And we're talking about simple services, not just in relation to 24-hour-a-day ATM access, but access to lodgements as well as withdrawals. And that makes a significant difference for many of the towns, particularly the businesses, being able to lodge cash. And, you know, it's one thing to put an obligation or requirement on businesses to accept cash, but then there needs to be a mechanism that that cash can actually be lodged in banks. So it's not just about ATM withdrawals, it needs to be looking at the issue of lodgements as well to ensure that these towns recover. And I think, you know, as a result of COVID, many of these towns, people found themselves acknowledging how important it was to have services in their local town. But the actions that have been taken by the banks, and I think the cost of living crisis, has forced many people to move their business to the bigger towns. And we need to take an active approach to try and reverse that. And I think part of doing that, Minister, is to set up a separate, independent banking force in this country. And I would propose that we would establish a Dáil committee to drive the agenda of establishing a state bank through a cross-party approach in relation to this, because I believe that if we do not have a cross-party approach in relation to it, where it is actually politically driven, then it's doomed to failure, because the reality is that the financial establishment in this country, in all of its guises, is determined to ensure that we don't have a third banking force in this country, a state-coordinated banking force that would actively compete against the two existing pillar banks. And there's no doubt that there is an absolute mindset block against state involvement in the banking sector. But surely, if COVID has taught us anything, it is that when needed, ways can be found for state intervention that is in the long-term public interest. The basic independent banking structure already exists in this country, although it's fragmented. And instead of a copy and paste model from some other country, we should start with our existing credit unions and our existing post office network across the country, along with our two existing state banks, namely the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland and Microfinance Ireland. Our post offices and credit unions provide a comprehensive branch network for our personal customers. An Post has over 500 post offices in locations without banks nearby. Also, the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland and Microfinance Ireland are already designated to offer flexible finance to SMEs. So rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, we need to build on these key strengths and design an economic strategy for rebuilding our economy through our local businesses, which are so important to the recovery outside our cities. Before the pandemic, there was 250,000 SMEs, accounting for 99.8% of total enterprises and 65% of total employment. SMEs are the backbone of this country and are vital if we are to re-establish a viable economy in many of our rural communities and towns. They're the backbone of these communities, but they need to have access to banking services, and I believe that we need to go significantly further than we're talking about here. I also believe that we need to be far more proactive in terms of providing competitive mortgage market in this country and access to affordable green finance for homeowners and landlords to improve the energy efficiency of their existing homes. And that is not happening at the moment within the existing market. And in tandem with that, with the Better Energy Home Scheme, we should introduce 0% long-term loans for retrofitting homes, whereby repayments are paid back through utility companies based on the energy savings, including the use of microgeneration technologies. And I believe that we could significantly reduce the cost of retrofitting homes in this country if we would allow HVO, hydro-treated vegetable oil, to be used as a cheap alternative for people to switch to sustainable renewable energy. Some 90% of HVO could be blended with 10% kerosene tomorrow morning to ensure that all oil-fired central heating systems in this country could be converted for about a cost of €300. The difficulty is at the moment that there is an agenda in this country to force people down the heat pump approach. And people are not being given an alternative in relation to it. And we have a report from the SEAI that's just been published, which says one of the reasons why they're forcing people down that road was in case that they might, if the cost of kerosene comes down in the future, that they might switch back from HVO to kerosene. But the figures, Minister, in relation to this are stark. So as I said, to convert your oil-fired central heating system to a renewable source of hydro-treated vegetable oil would cost approximately €300. To put in a heat pump for a building that's 50 or 60 years old, the cost of that is €80,000. Now, we have significant targets to meet in relation to our renewable energy, and putting that type of a burden on families around this country without an approach that I've proposed here of zero interest loans, with people making those repayments based on their energy savings, is irresponsible and putting an additional financial burden, unnecessary financial burden, on families here in this country. And while I'm on the issue of financial burdens in relation to the retrofitting at homes, the Warmer Home Scheme, we're still looking at in excess of 24 months. That's over 2 years for an older person to have their home retrofitted to meet the current needs in terms of energy efficiency. And that is completely unacceptable, that families and older people are left that length of time to have these retrofits carried out. This issue needs to be addressed, and needs to be addressed urgently. So, coming back to the point in relation to the financial services directly, Minister, during my term as Minister, I developed a strategy with An Post to protect it from financial collapse and use the An Post owned post offices as a focal point for the development of banking services and other government services. And An Post has the ability to become the offline partner for every single government service in this country, which could then actually be put completely online, saving a huge amount in terms of administration costs, in terms of motor tax, driving licences, passports, ID verification. I can go on and on in relation to it. And we could be using our post offices to allow people to go in and purchase government services through cash, and yet still maintain the online mechanisms that are being proposed by some of those agencies today. It's a win-win situation for everyone, and I think it is one that we do need to seriously look at again. So, in conclusion, the establishment of a state bank is not just a financial necessity, but I believe that it is a social imperative in this country. It will provide our communities with the needs that they require to thrive, and to ensure that no one in this country, regardless of location, is left behind into the future and can continue to access banking services and use cash. Thank you very much.